If you or someone you know is in crisis, Beth Nell Smith and the unusually callous party of Alberta is happy that their plans are working. Bruce Johnson, a man whose name the Medicine Hat News couldn't even be bothered to print when they covered this story, was 57 and on a fixed income. And Danielle Sith and her corrupt band of sociopaths pushed him over the edge when they decided that they needed to steal $200 a month from severely disabled Albertans, leaving them with only $1,700 a month to live on instead of the previous $1,900 that they were barely getting by on. Think about that for a second. Could you live on $1,900 a month? Moreover, could you do it in Alberta? I can somewhat relate because until very recently, after a head injury, I was not able to work full time. In fact, I could barely work at all. Now, I was very fortunate in that I had saved up some money from when I was making more. And so I had money that I had planned for retirement. I also had friends and family who pitched in to help me out. I also had my followers who sent me money in some cases. While I'd spent a lot of time quite stressed out, I was confident that I would get better before things were bad enough that I couldn't pull from that cushion. Bruce, however, didn't have a cushion anymore. In fact, in most of these government programs that help people with disabilities, they only start kicking in once your cushion is pretty well gone. I looked into it after hitting my head, once I could actually read again. And even in Manitoba, you have to have less than $20,000 in savings before you can even start getting regular funds from the government for long-term disability, even if you and your doctor know that you are never going to be able to work full-time again. And remember, people with disabilities don't just have to pay for rent. They have to pay for their home internet connection, a phone bill. They have to often pay for taxis or rideshare since they may be physically unable to get to a bus stop. And contrary to what government officials often think, they're still people and they need to pay for things that give them some level of entertainment or meaning in life. They need to be able to buy new clothes sometimes and toiletries and painkillers. Hundreds of little things throughout the year that bureaucrats don't think are essential. And it's worth noting that bureaucrats don't really take into account what people actually have to spend money on in order to function in society. They just look at the numbers and they think, what can I trick a distracted, able bodied voter into thinking is enough? The federal and provincial governments give billions in funding back to the oil industry in the form of subsidies and tax credits. They have the money for that. They're willing to go into debt to give the oil industry more money because the oil industry doesn't need the money. They have excess. They can attack politicians if we don't give them our money. But disabled people? Politicians fear what the oil industry will do to them if they have even the slightest hardship. Our government, they don't fear disabled people. Disabled people, we fear ourselves because we fear what we might do when Danielle and the oil industry take everything that we have left.